After the maid was fired, her toddler's 911 call changed everything. Everyone thought she was just the maid's child. Until one moment changed everything. Nobody in that mansion knew her name. Nobody cared. She was just a shadow following her mother from room to room. Quiet, small, invisible. But that night everything fell apart. Her mother was fired without warning, without mercy. Thrown out into the cold with nothing but a 3-year-old daughter clutching her hand. What happened next inside that house would haunt everyone who witnessed it. Phone call. A trembling little voice. Words no one expected from a child so young. By the time the sirens arrived, the truth had already started unraveling. A truth someone had worked very hard to hide. This wasn't just about a fired maid anymore. This was about to become the night an entire family's secrets came crashing down, because of one little girl who refused to stay silent. Hey everyone, welcome back. Before we start, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from tonight? I always love seeing how far these stories travel. If this is your first time here, consider subscribing because we tell real, raw, emotional stories every single week. The kind that stay with you long after the video ends. This one is heavy. This one is important. And I promise you, the ending will leave you speechless. So stay until the very last word because nothing about this story is what it seems. Let's begin. Nobody expected the storm to start on such an ordinary Tuesday evening. The Whitmore mansion sat behind iron gates on the edge of town, the kind of house people slowed their cars down to stare at. White columns, manicured hedges, a fountain that never stopped running, even in winter. Inside, everything gleamed, marble floors, crystal chandeliers. Silence so complete it felt expensive. Maria Alvarez had worked there for almost 2 years. She was 28 years old, quiet, careful, the kind of woman who noticed things other people missed. A chipped vase before it got blamed on someone else, a forgotten umbrella by the door, the exact way Mr. Whitmore liked his coffee, black, no sugar, poured before he even asked. She wasn't just good at her job. She loved it, in the strange, quiet way people love things that give them purpose. And she had a daughter. Lily was 3 years old, with dark curls that never stayed in place and eyes that seemed to understand more than a toddler should. She wasn't supposed to be at the house that evening. But Maria's babysitter had cancelled last minute, and Mr. Whitmore, in a rare moment of softness, had told her, "Just this once. Keep her quiet, and it's fine." So Lily sat in the corner of the kitchen with a coloring book, humming softly to herself, while her mother worked. Nobody paid attention to her. That was the point. Children were supposed to be background noise in a house like this, seen for a moment, then forgotten. But Lily noticed everything. She noticed the way Mrs. Whitmore's sister, Diane, moved through the house that night like she was looking for something. She noticed how Diane kept glancing toward the study, toward the locked drawer beneath Mr. Whitmore's desk, toward the security camera blinking its small red light in the corner of the hallway. Lily didn't understand what any of it meant. She was 3. She just knew that the tall woman with the sharp perfume made her feel cold inside, the way thunder does before you hear it. Around 8 o'clock, raised voices echoed from the study. Maria was polishing silverware in the dining room when she heard it. Mr. Whitmore's voice, low and controlled, and Diane's voice, sharp, defensive, cutting through the walls like a blade. "You have no right to go through my things," Mr. Whitmore said. "I was looking for a pen," Diane snapped back, too quickly, too rehearsed. Maria didn't think much of it. Rich families argued. It wasn't her business. But 10 minutes later everything changed. Mrs. Whitmore stormed into the kitchen, her face pale, her hands trembling in a way Maria had never seen before. Behind her, Mr. Whitmore's expression was unreadable, cold, distant, like a door slamming shut. "Maria," Mrs. Whitmore said, her voice tight. "We need to talk." Maria set down the silverware, her stomach twisting with a feeling she couldn't name. Across the room, Lily looked up from her coloring book, sensing the shift in the air the way children always do, long before adults think they notice. "Something valuable is missing," Mrs. Whitmore continued. A piece of jewelry. It was in my husband's study. Maria's heart dropped. I haven't been in the study today, ma'am. That's not what the camera shows. The words hit like a slap. Maria opened her mouth to protest, to explain, but Mrs. Whitmore raised a hand, cutting her off. I don't want excuses. I want you gone. Tonight. The kitchen went silent except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the sound of Lily's crayon stopping mid-stroke. Maria's voice cracked. Please. I've worked here for 2 years. I would never. The footage doesn't lie, Maria. But it did. Someone had made sure of that. Maria didn't know it yet, but the person who had truly gone through that drawer, who had truly taken what was missing, was standing just a few feet away, arms crossed, watching the scene unfold with something that almost looked like relief. And in the corner, unnoticed, forgotten, 3-year-old Lily watched her mother's hands begin to shake. She didn't understand the word fired. She didn't understand accusations or missing jewelry or the calculated cruelty of people who had everything and still wanted more. But she understood her mother's tears. She had never seen her mother cry before. Not once. Not even the night their apartment flooded. Not even the night the electricity got shut off. Not even the night Maria sat in the dark eating crackers for dinner so Lily could have the last of the soup. But she was crying now, quietly, desperately, as Mrs. Whitmore turned and walked away without looking back. Pack your things, Mrs. Whitmore said over her shoulder. Both of you need to be out within the hour. The door to the study closed. And Maria Alvarez, 28 years old, exhausted, humiliated, and utterly alone, sank into a kitchen chair and put her face in her hands. She didn't see her daughter slip off her own chair. She didn't see Lily walk quietly toward the hallway, toward the small black telephone mounted on the wall near the pantry, the one Maria had shown her months ago, half as a joke, half out of habit. If you're ever scared, Maria had said, laughing softly at the time, just press the buttons like this. When. Someone will always answer. Lily had never forgotten. And tonight, watching her mother break in a way she had never seen before, something inside her small heart decided that this was exactly the kind of scared her mother had meant. What Lily did next would leave the entire house frozen in disbelief. Her tiny fingers reached up, barely tall enough to touch the receiver. She pulled it down carefully, the way her mother had shown her, and pressed the numbers one at a time, whispering them to herself like a secret prayer. When. The line clicked. A calm voice answered on the other end. 911, what's your emergency? Lily froze for a moment, suddenly unsure. She had practiced this in her imagination 100 times, but now that it was real, her small voice came out barely above a whisper. My mommy is crying, she said. The bad lady made her cry. The dispatcher's voice softened immediately, trained for exactly this kind of call. Sweetheart, can you tell me your name? Lily. Okay, Lily. Where are you right now? At the big house. With the fountain. The dispatcher asked more questions, gently, patiently, trying to determine whether this was an emergency or simply a frightened child. But then Lily said something that changed everything. The lady with the sparkly necklace put it in her purse. Saw her. She said don't tell. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Lily, can you tell me more about the sparkly necklace? The one from Daddy's office. The one in the drawer. She took it and put it in her purse. Then she said Mommy did it. But Mommy didn't do it. Mommy was cleaning the silver. Meanwhile in the kitchen, Maria had finally lifted her head, wiping her eyes, ready to gather what little dignity she had left and start packing. That's when she noticed the hallway was empty. Lily. No answer. Panic flooded through her, sharp and immediate. She stood up so fast the chair scraped against the marble floor. Lily, baby, where are you? She rounded the corner just as her daughter's small voice carried down the hallway. And the bad lady is in the room by the stairs. She has short blonde hair and she smells like flowers, but really strong flowers like at church. Maria's blood ran cold. She rushed forward and gently but urgently pulled the phone from Lily's small hands, her heart pounding. Hello. Hello, I'm so sorry, this is. Ma'am, this is 911 dispatch. We have a report of a possible theft in progress at this address. Is everything all right? Maria's mind spun, unable to process what was happening. There's been a misunderstanding, my daughter, Ma'am, your daughter provided a detailed description of an incident. Officers are already being dispatched to your location as a precaution. No, please, that's not necessary, we're leaving, we don't want any trouble. But it was too late. The wheels were already turning. Behind her, footsteps echoed against the marble floor. Mr. Whitmore appeared in the hallway, his expression tight with confusion. What's going on? Why do I hear sirens outside? Maria turned, horrified, phone still clutched in her trembling hand. I'm so sorry, sir. My daughter, she called 911, she didn't understand, she's only 3, please, I can explain. But Mr. Whitmore wasn't looking at her. He was looking past her down the hallway to where his sister-in-law stood frozen near the staircase, her purse clutched tightly against her chest, her face suddenly pale in a way that had nothing to do with fright over strangers, and everything to do with fear of being caught. Diane, he said slowly. What did Lily say she saw? Diane's laugh came out too high, too forced. She's a child, Robert. Children make things up. But something in her voice cracked at the edges, just slightly, just enough for a man who had built an empire on reading people to notice. Outside, the flashing lights of a police cruiser began painting red and blue shadows across the mansion's white columns. And inside, 3-year-old Lily, still holding tightly to her mother's leg, looked up with wide, innocent eyes and said the words that would unravel everything. She's lying, Mommy. Saw her. I really did. Nobody could have predicted what the police would find in the next 10 minutes. 2 officers stepped through the grand front doors, their presence transforming the elegant foyer into something colder, more serious. Mrs. Whitmore appeared from the study, confusion and irritation flashing across her face. I don't understand, she said. Why are the police here? This is a private matter. Ma'am, one officer said calmly, we received a call reporting a theft in progress. We need to ask a few questions before we can leave. Mrs. Whitmore's eyes darted toward Maria, sharp and accusing. This is exactly why I fired her. She's making up stories now to save herself. I didn't call anyone, Maria said, her voice shaking. My daughter did. She's 3 years old. She didn't know what she was doing. The officer knelt down slightly, addressing Lily with the same practiced gentleness he'd use with any frightened child. Hi there. My name is Officer Reyes. Can you tell me what you saw tonight? Lily looked up at her mother first, seeking permission, seeking safety. Maria nodded softly, tears still glistening in her eyes, and gave her daughter's hand a small, reassuring squeeze. The lady took the sparkly thing from Daddy's drawer, Lily said, pointing toward Diane. She put it in her purse. Then she said Mommy did it so Mommy wouldn't get blamed. But Mommy didn't do anything wrong. Mommy was cleaning spoons. Diane's face had gone from pale to something closer to gray. This is absurd, she said, forcing a laugh that fooled no one. She's a toddler repeating nonsense. But Mr. Whitmore was no longer looking at Maria. He was staring at his sister-in-law with an expression that had shifted from confusion to something far heavier, suspicion. Diane, he said quietly. Open your purse. Robert, this is ridiculous. Open your purse. The room fell into a silence so complete you could hear the fountain outside still running, water splashing softly against stone, indifferent to the storm unfolding inside. Diane's hands trembled as she clutched the purse tighter against her body. I don't have to prove anything to you. I'm your wife's sister. And I'm asking you to open your purse, he repeated, his voice low, controlled, but carrying a weight that made even the police officers straighten slightly. For a long moment nobody moved. Then, slowly, reluctantly, Diane reached inside her purse and pulled out a small velvet pouch. Her fingers hesitated over it like it burned to hold. "It's not what you think," she whispered. Mr. Whitmore stepped forward and took it from her hands. He opened it carefully, and there, gleaming under the chandelier light, sat a diamond necklace. The same necklace that had supposedly gone missing, the same necklace Maria had been accused of stealing. The room seemed to hold its breath. Mrs. Whitmore's face drained of all color. "Diane, why do you have that?" Diane's carefully constructed composure finally cracked. "I needed money, Claire. You have no idea what it's like, watching you live like this while I struggle every single month. I was going to sell it. Just this once. I was going to fix everything and no one would even notice it was gone." "So you blamed an innocent woman," Mr. Whitmore said, his voice dangerously quiet. "A woman who has worked for this family for 2 years without a single complaint. You let her be humiliated. You let her be fired. You let her lose her home over your debts." Maria stood frozen, tears streaming silently down her face, still holding her daughter close, still trying to process the sudden, dizzying shift from disgrace to vindication. Officer Reyes cleared his throat gently. "Ma'am, given the circumstances, we're going to need to document this properly. If charges are pressed, this could become a formal police matter." Mrs. Whitmore turned to Maria, her expression a complicated mixture of shame and disbelief. "Maria, I am so sorry. I should have questioned the footage more carefully. I should have trusted you." But Maria wasn't looking at her employer anymore. She was looking down at her daughter, at the small, brave 3-year-old girl who had somehow, against every possible odd, uncovered a truth that adults had been too blind or too trusting to see. "You saved us," Maria whispered, kneeling down and pulling Lily into a tight embrace. "My brave, brave girl." Lily, still not fully understanding the magnitude of what had just happened, simply hugged her mother back and said the only thing that mattered to her in that moment. "I didn't want you to be sad anymore, Mommy." But the night wasn't over yet, and what happened next would reveal something none of them expected. As the officers took statements and Diane sat pale and silent on the living room sofa, waiting to learn her fate, Mr. Whitmore approached Maria with an expression she had never seen on his face before. Something soft, something almost fragile beneath the usual composed exterior of a man worth millions. "Maria," he said quietly, "I owe you an apology far greater than words can offer." Maria wiped her eyes, still holding Lily against her hip. "You don't have to say anything, sir. I understand how it looked." "No," he said firmly. "I don't think you do." He glanced toward Lily, who was watching him with a curious, unfiltered attention only children possess, and something in his gaze softened even further. "Do you know why I hired you 2 years ago, Maria?" She shook her head, confused. "Because you reminded me of my own mother," he said, his voice suddenly distant, carrying the weight of memory. "She cleaned houses just like this one back before I built any of this. She worked long hours, never complained, and raised me alone after my father left." Maria's breath caught. In 2 years of working for the Whitmores, she had never once heard him speak about his past. "She used to tell me that the truest measure of a person isn't their wealth," he continued. "It's how they treat people who have nothing to offer them in return." He looked at Lily again, his expression breaking into something Maria had never seen from him. Genuine, unguarded emotion. "Your daughter has more courage than most adults I know," he said. "She stood in a house full of strangers, facing people far more powerful than herself, and she told the truth without hesitation. That takes a kind of bravery most people lose by the time they're grown." Maria's tears returned, but this time they weren't born from humiliation. "I was terrified," she admitted. "I didn't know what to do. I've never had to fight for anything like this before. I froze. You didn't have to fight, he said gently. Your daughter fought for you. Across the room, Officer Reyes was speaking quietly with Mrs. Whitmore, discussing whether formal charges would be pressed against Diane. Mrs. Whitmore's voice trembled as she made her decision. She's my sister, she said softly. But what she did was wrong. I can't protect her from the consequences of that. Not this time. Diane, overhearing this, buried her face in her hands, finally understanding the full weight of what her desperation had cost her, not just legally but within her own family. Meanwhile, Mr. Whitmore turned back to Maria with a look of quiet determination. I want you to keep your position here, he said. Not out of guilt. Not out of obligation. Because you are exactly the kind of person I want representing this household. And I want to make things right in a way that matters. Maria blinked, stunned. Sir, I don't understand. Starting tomorrow, your salary will be doubled. Lily will have access to the best educational opportunities this city can offer, fully covered, for as long as she wants them. This isn't charity, Maria. This is recognition of what almost slipped through our fingers tonight because of carelessness and cruelty. Maria's knees nearly buckled beneath the weight of the moment, disbelief and gratitude crashing over her in overwhelming waves. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Say you'll stay, he said simply. Before she could answer, a small voice interrupted them both. Does this mean we don't have to leave? Lily asked, looking between the two adults with wide, hopeful eyes. Mr. Whitmore knelt down slowly, bringing himself to her eye level, something Maria had never once seen him do with any child, not even his own nieces and nephews during holiday visits. No, sweetheart, he said gently. You're not going anywhere. In fact, I think this house needs more people like you in it. Lily's small face broke into the first smile Maria had seen from her all evening, bright and unguarded, the kind of smile that only children manage after storms have passed. But even as relief settled over the room, Maria couldn't shake the feeling that this night had changed something far larger than just her job security. It had cracked open a version of this family she had never been allowed to see before. The fractures, the desperation, the quiet resentments hiding beneath polished floors and crystal chandeliers. And somewhere beneath her gratitude, a small, nagging thought lingered. If Diane had been desperate enough to steal from her own sister, how many other secrets were still hidden inside these walls, waiting for the right small voice to finally speak them aloud? What Maria didn't know was that this night would echo far beyond the walls of the mansion. Word of what happened spread quickly, the way stories do in households with staff and neighbors and distant relatives eager for something to talk about. Within days, other members of the Whitmore family began reaching out, some out of concern, others out of curiosity, a few out of something closer to guilt. Mrs. Whitmore's mother called, her voice tight with disbelief. Claire, is it true? Diane really did that? It's true, Mrs. Whitmore admitted, exhaustion heavy in her voice. And I almost let an innocent woman take the blame for it. The family gathered a week later for what was supposed to be a quiet dinner, but quickly became something far more emotional. Diane, humiliated and stripped of the pride she'd worn like armor for years, finally opened up about the financial struggles she had hidden from everyone. I didn't know how to ask for help, she admitted through tears. I thought admitting I was drowning would make everyone see me as a failure. Mr. Whitmore, surprising everyone in the room, offered to help her formally, setting up a structured repayment plan for her debts in exchange for honesty and accountability moving forward. No charges were pressed, not out of leniency for the crime itself, but because Maria herself had asked for mercy. She made a terrible choice, Maria had told Mrs. Whitmore privately, but locking her away won't undo the damage. Maybe helping her will. It was a decision that stunned everyone, especially considering how close Maria had come to losing everything because of Diane's actions. But Maria understood something many people forget, that grace given freely often changes people more deeply than punishment ever could. Meanwhile, Lily had unknowingly become something of a small legend within the household staff. The gardener called her the little detective. The cooks started saving her extra cookies for bravery. Even Mrs. Whitmore, once cold and distant toward the help, began stopping by the kitchen just to see the little girl who had, without even understanding it, saved her mother's dignity and exposed a truth that had been buried under layers of privilege and denial. One afternoon, as Lily sat coloring at the same kitchen table where everything had unfolded, Mrs. Whitmore approached quietly and sat down across from her. "Lily," she said softly, "do you know what you did that night?" Lily looked up, considering the question with a serious concentration only small children bring to simple things. "I telled the truth." Mrs. Whitmore smiled, something genuine breaking through her usually composed exterior. "Yes, you told the truth. Even when it was scary." "Mommy says the truth is always braver than lying," Lily said matter-of-factly, returning to her coloring as if she hadn't just delivered wisdom that adults spend entire lifetimes struggling to embody. Mrs. Whitmore watched her for a long moment, something shifting behind her eyes. A quiet recognition that perhaps she had spent too many years surrounded by adults who calculated every word, every action, every relationship for personal gain, and not nearly enough time around people who simply told the truth because it was right. That evening, she made a decision that would ripple through the household in unexpected ways. She called a family meeting, gathering not just her immediate relatives but the household staff as well, an unprecedented move in a home where the lines between employer and employee had always remained sharply drawn. "Things are going to change around here," she announced. "Starting with how we treat the people who make this house function. No one should ever again be blamed, humiliated, or dismissed without proper investigation. What happened to Maria should never happen to anyone else in this house." The staff exchanged surprised glances, unaccustomed to such acknowledgement from the family they served. But the biggest change was yet to come, one that none of them could have predicted, one that would tie the threads of this story together in a way that felt almost like fate stepping in where human carelessness had failed. 3 months later, everything came full circle in a way nobody could have imagined. The Whitmores hosted their annual charity gala, an elegant affair meant to raise funds for underprivileged families throughout the city. Hundreds of wealthy guests filled the mansion's grand ballroom, the same ballroom where, months earlier, an innocent woman had nearly lost everything over a lie. This year, however, Mr. Whitmore had insisted on something different. Instead of the usual speeches about charitable giving delivered by wealthy donors distant from the struggles they claimed to address, he asked Maria to say a few words about what real support looks like for working families. Maria stood nervously at the podium, Lily's small hand tucked safely in hers, facing a room full of people far wealthier and more powerful than she had ever imagined addressing. 3 months ago, she began, her voice trembling slightly before steadying, "I almost lost my job, my home, and my dignity because of a lie someone else told to protect themselves." The room fell silent, guests leaning forward, drawn into a story most of them had only heard fragments of through gossip and second-hand accounts. But that night something happened that changed everything. My daughter, who was only 3 years old, refused to stay silent when she saw something wrong. She didn't understand the consequences. She didn't understand the power dynamics in that room, or how frightening it can be for someone like me to challenge someone like the people I worked for. She just knew the truth mattered. Maria looked down at Lily, who beamed up at her with the innocent pride only small children carry so effortlessly. "Children remind us of something we forget as adults," Maria continued. "That courage isn't about power or position. It's about doing what's right, even when you're the smallest person in the room." The audience erupted into warm applause, several guests wiping tears from their eyes, moved by the raw honesty of a story that felt worlds away from the polished speeches usually delivered at events like this. But then, something unexpected happened. An elderly woman in the front row rose slowly to her feet, leaning heavily on a cane, her eyes fixed intently on Lily. "Excuse me," she said, her voice trembling with something that sounded like disbelief. May I ask this child's name? Maria, confused but polite, answered. Her name is Lily. The woman's hand rose to her chest, her eyes filling with tears. Lily Alvarez. Maria's breath caught. Yes. How did you? My name is Eleanor Reyes, the woman said, her voice shaking. I was a nurse at St. Catherine's Hospital 30 years ago. I helped deliver a baby girl to a young mother who had nowhere else to turn. That mother's name was Isabel Alvarez. Maria's entire body went still. That was my mother, she whispered. She passed away when I was young. I never knew much about her time before I was born. Eleanor's eyes glistened with decades of unspoken memory. Your mother saved my daughter's life that same week, pulling her from a house fire before emergency services even arrived. I never got the chance to properly thank her. I looked for her for years afterward, but she moved, and I lost track of her completely. The room, already emotional, fell into stunned silence as the pieces of an unexpected story began weaving themselves together across decades and generations. She never mentioned any of this, Maria said, tears streaming freely now. She never told me she was a hero. She probably didn't think of herself that way, Eleanor said gently. People who do good things simply because it's right rarely do. It seems your daughter inherited that same quiet courage. Maria looked down at Lily, understanding now, in a way she never had before, that the bravery her daughter displayed that terrifying night wasn't something learned. It was something inherited, passed down through generations of women who chose truth and courage over silence and safety, even when the cost was high. Mr. Whitmore, watching from across the room, felt something shift deeply within his own understanding of the family working under his roof. These weren't simply employees. They were carriers of an unbroken thread of quiet heroism that had touched more lives than any of them had realized. As the evening drew to a close, Eleanor Reyes made a promise to stay in touch, determined to help document and honor Isabel Alvarez's forgotten legacy, ensuring that Maria and Lily would finally know the full story of the woman who came before them. And as guests slowly began to leave, whispering amongst themselves about the extraordinary story they had just witnessed unfold live before their eyes, Maria knelt down and pulled her daughter into a tight embrace. You saved us that night, she whispered into Lily's soft curls. And somehow, you connected us to a part of our family we thought was lost forever. Lily, still too young to fully grasp the magnitude of what had happened, simply smiled and said the words that captured the entire night perfectly. I just didn't want you to be sad, Mommy. That's all. Sometimes the smallest voices carry the loudest truths. Sometimes courage doesn't come wrapped in wealth or power or status, but in tiny hands dialing numbers they barely understand, refusing to let injustice go unspoken. And sometimes, the bravest people in the room are the ones nobody bothered to notice at all. If this story touched your heart tonight, give it a like, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and subscribe for more emotional stories that remind us what truly matters. Thank you for staying until the end.